And what we'll do is, what usually works best when we do this is if when we start, if everyone just will mute your video, just because it looks weird with like a bunch of videos going on when it's just two people talking. You can mute your video when we start if you don't mind. And obviously keep your sound muted. That'd be great too. And then at the end, when we're done, we'll take like a quick little break, and then we'll come back and we'll do some processing of what you saw and heard, and Crystal will get a chance to give input into that as well. And this is really just what I do as an example. I try to give students an example and kind of show you kind of what it looks like, because besides you guys doing this mock session with each other, it won't be long. You'll be in front of people and you'll be working with people. And so I want to try to give you those examples and experiences as quick as possible. Like I said, Crystal, I'll watch the clock. You won't have to worry about it. And most of the time we kind of find like a natural stopping place and we just stop. Okay. All right, cool. All right, well, let's get started. I'm going to move some stuff around my screen real quick just to get it out of the way. And you might hear me taking notes. Like I might type some stuff just because if I don't, I'll forget. And I'll just like keep asking you over and over. And I don't want to do that. Okay. All right. Okay, let's get going. So Crystal, again, I really appreciate you meeting with me. And today will be kind of like broad, like general questions and broad questions. And if you ever have questions for me, obviously you can ask me too. But I'd like to kind of just start out with like, okay, when you first thought about talking to someone about the things that are going on, if you wouldn't mind telling me the things you were thinking, like, hey, I wish I could get help with this, or I want to understand this, like what kinds of things were going on for you?
Well, like we have kind of like walking on eggshells relationship in my family, and just sometimes, most of the time it's good. And I want to point on my son. Um, Everything's good, and then about every 6 months or so, he'll have like a huge blow up, and like all the everything pressure, and he finally just it's kind of like teenage rebellion stuff, and just want to find some help for that to not let it get to that point.
Yeah. And how old is he?
15.
15. Yeah. Awesome. Now, when you were saying sometimes eggshells with your family, I'm assuming what you're talking about is like your family at home right there, not like your extended family kind of stuff.
Yeah, just at home. Like it's blended family,
Okay.
stepdad, stepson, and he's not used to that. He's always been just the two of us. So that's new people in our house that is becoming a problem. Like, you're not my dad, kind of.
Oh, right. Gotcha. How long have you and your husband been together?
Just 2 years. It's new.
Okay. 2 years married.
Hmm.
Yeah. And how long did you date?
A year, but he didn't live here.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And does he have children too?
Yes, he has a 13-year-old and my son's 15. So, well, he's about to turn 13, so 12. There's an age difference. And
Okay.
so one is like, I feeling I'm not invited, and the other one is like not wanting to hang out with a little kid.
And you said 13-year-old son?
Yes, he has a
Okay.
13-year-old son, and I have a 15-year-old son.
Gotcha. And does his son live with you guys full time?
No, just like 2 or 3 nights a week.
Gotcha. So it's like 50-50 kind of.
Yeah, he lives
Okay.
close.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah. If you'll bear with me, I just want to try to get my head around like just generally what's going on practically, because a lot of times whenever, like you were talking about a blended family, obviously there's lots of moving parts there. Does your son have the same visitation with his dad, his biological dad?
No, he doesn't know him.
He doesn't know him. Okay.
So he's never had to have, like, I think he doesn't really understand the family roles, like to respect adults. I mean, he's very respectful, but
Yeah.
he doesn't, like, he's been a man and doesn't know,
Yeah.
like, you have to talk with respect to,
Oh,
you're
gotcha. Yeah.
not the you're not my dad kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And he's actually said that out loud.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
shut up, your opinion doesn't matter, you're not my dad. But
Okay.
that was a big blow up. He's actually a very nice kid.
Well, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
that was a mad blow
Yeah.
up.
I'm not going to have this weird image of him like yelling and screaming
Yeah,
all the time. That's
he
okay.
doesn't do that often.
Yeah.
It's once in a blue moon. But I don't want it to build to that.
Yeah. Well, of course. Of course. How long um would you say this has been happening? Like,
Probably just like the last year.
okay. So the first year you were married was okay.
It was okay. And then he was like, ah, this sucks.
Yeah. Okay. Is he pretty open with you? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you guys have been together 15 years, so he knows you pretty well.
Not as much as he used to be because he's 15. So now, like, if I try to talk, like, hey, what about girls?
Yeah.
Doesn't want me to be involved in that kind of.
That's a non-mom conversation, sounds like.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Have there ever been, even with you guys, anytime, has there ever been other like father types of figures in his life?
Yeah, I was married before, but he doesn't remember because it was we've been divorced for 9 years. So
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So this is really the first kind of like mom, dad in a house kind of situation that he would actually know
hmm
what's going on.
yes.
Okay. Not that he doesn't know, but his first experience of it.
hmm
Okay. All right. Okay. So, so I'm gonna ask a couple of, some of these are broad and they might sound weird, but just I'm trying to wrap my head around a couple of things. If you like, what is it you feel like would be helpful to know or to do or anything
I
like
feel
that?
like making a better relationship between everybody because um it's like your son, like him and his son against me and my son. Like his son is young and very sensitive about everything, and my son is like no care in the world and just does him and doesn't realize he's hurting someone's feelings. Like when we went on vacation, we got there, my son was tired, he went in the room, the hall light was on, he left it on, and went to sleep, and he closed the door. And so his son was like, I don't feel like I'm invited in because the door is closed. And like, so he naturally just does himself and doesn't know that he's hurting someone's feelings.
Oh, okay.
So we
Gotcha.
just need to build better relationships that, and like, we're not trying to hurt somebody's feelings.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you know, like, again, this sounds really weird. I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you know, like, when people's feelings are hurt or when someone's upset or someone's, and I'm not talking about just your husband's son. It could be your son, you, your husband. Like, how do we know if like something's up?
Well, he has his own things from like divorce and feelings and things. So he like pouts and cries, but my son gets angry. So everybody's
Oh,
looks
okay.
different. My husband like nitpicks, like who ate that last ice cream? When he starts getting frustrated, he starts nitpicking. So everybody looks different.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So everyone kind of handles things differently, it sounds
hmm
like,
And me,
or
I'm
their
real
responses are
passive,
different. Yeah.
and then I blow up. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So events, is there ever a time when everyone blows up?
No, we take turns.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, at least not everyone's blowing up at the same time. That's a
Yeah.
good thing. Are there times when people just like, I need a break and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
we separate or whatever?
hmm
Okay.
That
Good.
was the trip. We were floating down the river, me
Hmm.
and my son, and him and his son separated so we can have a good river float. So,
Yeah. Yeah. How long did that last, the separation part?
oh, we were all happy again when we got back in the car.
Okay. So just having that little bit of time
hmm
was okay. Okay. How was the trips overall? Like the whole trip?
Well, it just started off rocky with the whole him closing the door and
Okay.
going to sleep. And that
Okay.
kind of like set the tone. But we tried to do fun things and
Yeah.
it was okay. It just started off rocky and kind of,
Yeah.
it could have been more fun.
Yeah. Well, what in your to you, like what have been some of the hard adjustments that you have felt, like as you're obviously in the in the midst of blending, you're in the midst of, like you said, trying to figure out how everyone gets along and how everyone adjusts to each other. Like, what's been things that have been struggles for you personally?
Just maybe overboard trying to make everybody happy, and then like what I do doesn't, like those Orby water pellet guns came out. I went and got two. I was like, yay, we're gonna do this. My son, I don't want that. I'm too old for that. I'm like, nobody's too old for that. But
Yeah.
like I try really hard to make everybody have a good time, or what do you want to eat? And there's always somebody who doesn't want it. But
Yeah. Yeah. Is anyone else given that type of effort?
I think I do the most.
Yeah. And this isn't bad or good. It's just,
Yeah.
it just is. It could be just dynamics of the, all the
And because
relationships.
I'm a teacher, I have the summer, I have more time to do the most. Like
Hmm.
my husband works 6 days a week
Hmm.
and out in the heat, and he gets home like 6 or 7 and tired. So, um, I'm in the house air conditioning summer break. So I have more
Right.
time to be that way.
Right. How did you and your husband meet?
Just through friends.
Okay. The reason why I ask is because I've got a lot of clients right now that have met online, like more than
Mhm.
ever, and so I always ask stuff like that just to ask. And how long was it before you met each other's kids? When you met after you met each other?
Oh, we didn't play good rules with that. We went to the zoo, and then we went to the video. It was the summer, or it was like April, what, spring. So we went out and did stuff probably just after like a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Like we didn't, we just started going out and doing stuff with the kids. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's okay.
yeah,
I
we
mean,
didn't follow the rules with that one. But
yeah. Well, what are the rules?
I don't know.
Yeah. It seems like there should be a rule, right, for something.
Yeah, usually wait 6 months, but whatever. Let's go have
Yeah.
fun. We went to the zoo, the video game museum,
Yeah.
whatever we wanted to do.
Yeah. So one of the things you're talking about right now, obviously, is like, hey, how can we all be on the same team, be on the same page? How can we get along? That's
Hmm.
one thing for sure. Is there anything else that would be helpful?
Um, making them more motivated to go, like finding things that everybody wants to do, like go play video games at an arcade. One wants to, one doesn't. um I've been wanting to, I mean, just getting them to get up and get out of the house. I think teenagers now don't want to get up and get out of the house.
Yeah.
And then everybody be on the same page about what we want to do. One doesn't like anything with water, and we love water stuff, so it's like,
Oh, okay.
it makes it difficult.
So when that happens, if one person wants to do one thing and the other person wants to do another thing, which you could have four people want to do different things.
We have to, we end up deciding on one thing and just go. And like my son, if like we went bowling, my son did not want to go bowling, so he was like pouty the whole time and
Yeah.
on his phone, not really want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. What's that like for you
It was,
when that
I was
happens?
one, so it was good. It was annoying. I
Yeah.
was like, just be in the moment. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be your way all the time. Just have fun. But
Yeah. So when you're saying annoying, you mean like embarrassing,
no,
frustrating?
it's frustrating. Like, just roll the ball and try to hit the pins, and don't do it angry. That's all you have to do. It's weird.
Does it work? Does that work?
Not at all. He
Yeah.
just acts like he doesn't want to be there the whole time.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
it takes the fun out of, like, it could be
Yeah.
more, everything could be more fun if people would just be, you don't have to like everything we go do 100%, just do it. It's not like
Yeah.
you're not capable of doing it.
Right. What when you feel annoyed like that or irritated, whatever it is, I guess in kind of any situation, really. I mean, it's not uncommon for anyone to get annoyed or irritated, especially in situations like that. When you feel that way, like how do you usually respond to it?
Um, First I try to make him like
Hmm.
do this now. And
Hmm.
then after I see that he's just gonna keep like stonewall with the
Mm-hmm.
I ignore it and have a good time myself. I won.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
So I just like, okay, you're gonna be that way. Let me know next time you want to do something. It's a no, you know.
Okay. Okay.
Like the
So,
buck up stuff. It was asking to go out of town with a friend of parents I don't know. And so I
okay.
started asking a lot of questions because I don't know the parents and I'd have to meet them. And but then he talked back. And so I said, well, you just got your answer. You did it to yourself. It's a no. You know, not gonna talk to adults. Why do I have to respect adults? Well, that's the way the world works. So
Yeah. Okay. But that situation was like a separate thing than what you were talking about earlier. That was something that he wanted to do something. You were asking questions to understand like who he was going to be with and who they are. And he was kind of like getting,
well, that's what led up to then he wasn't understanding why I was asking so many questions.
mm,
Like, what does it matter? Well, because I do know the children. I don't, the children, they're 15. I know
yeah.
the boys, but I don't know that dad, so
Mhm.
that's why I'm asking questions. And then so my husband chimed in and said, she's asking this because she doesn't know him and you're still a minor and we're responsible for you and need to know that you're safe. Your opinion doesn't matter. He was just like reiterating what I was saying to try and support me because he was not listening. But
Hmm.
yeah, that was a
So,
tough situation.
all right. So he wanted to go somewhere and you know that you knew the friends, you knew the kids, but you
I
didn't know
know
the
that I
dad.
know all the kids.
You want to know the dad. You want to know more about the dad and
Hmm.
asking questions. He obviously didn't like that very much. And then your husband joined the conversation too, to
Right.
basically say, hey, here's the reason, you know.
And that's where the "you're not my dad" came in, which
Okay.
every stepdad I'm sure has heard that at one point.
So when your son got upset, he didn't say that to you. He said that to your husband.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
He was just back talking me. He got more rude to him.
Yeah, more direct too. It sounds
Yeah.
like specifically.
Hmm.
How did your husband respond?
He got mad and he was driving.
Oh, okay.
So, but he kept the cool so we could, get home. And he respected that I said, okay, no, you can't go.
Okay. Gotcha. Do you guys have
Good
any
by now.
do you have any expectations over like who, if we need to have discipline or if we need to have change something, or if someone's not following a rule and we need to have some kind of discipline for that or whatever? Do you guys have rules or expectations on who does that with whose son or who doesn't or anything like that?
No, I think at that moment he just felt like he had to support me.
Hmm.
And so that's why he spoke up. But no, that might be a good step.
Well, I was just wondering. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
it's
we
just
don't.
okay. And keep in mind that like here's the one thing I don't want to happen. I'm going to ask questions, not because I'm like, oh, I'm going to sit here and judge everything you're doing. It has nothing to do with that, other than trying to understand the situation, really. Because it sounds to me like, from what you're saying, it sounds like you're trying and doing the best you know how to do. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, this is just like a few well, the how it led up, like he was already feeling upset and
Yeah.
that's with a big blow up and it rarely happens, but
Yeah.
he's a good kid.
Yeah. I mean, how much experience in that house? How much experience do all of you have doing this, blending a family?
Zero.
Yeah. So if we
And
don't,
and I mean he
yeah.
makes good grades.
Hmm.
He does really well. But
Hmm. So when we don't have experience with something, what's our expectation?
for it to be perfect,
Yeah, it'd be
pretty
great,
freaking
right?
good. Yeah.
So if we had a magic wand, we could wave it and everybody would be great, right?
Yeah, we could go bowling and everybody would have the best time of their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So part of what I'm hearing is some of this is like kind of towards the beginning stages of blending, right? So we're trying to get used to everyone, used to whatever the rules need to be or expectations, or, and I'm not trying to make excuses for
Yeah.
behavior or
Instead
anything.
of like everybody do their own thing, we got to do sometimes. We have to have Sunday fun day sometimes. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but right now it sounds to me like everyone's experiencing this blended family differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's going through a different experience, in that experience is causing different reactions at different times.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it sounds like. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And there's no one that really likes negative conflictual reactions. I don't care who you are.
Right.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Is there anything else that you haven't told me in terms of like, again, this is like, broad, you know,
Yeah.
10,000-foot view of everything. Is there anything else that would be helpful to know about anything that's going on? Do you think?
Not that I could think of.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with your son, just in general, over the years.
Um. Well, it was really good, and then this might be too much for about 4 years ago. I had foster kids for 4 years,
Mm.
and they had RAD, the reactive attachment disorder.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was extremely hard. But now they've been gone for about a year and a half. And so, like, the stress level has gone down a lot. But that was like kids with behavior,
Yeah.
extreme behavior and they were deaf. So, a lot of my attention went to that because I had to teach them language. That's what I do for a living, is deafblind. They were my students. And so I took them out of from CPS to do foster care.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have them for a long time.
How long were they? How long did you have them?
4 years.
4 years.
So like
Okay.
he also has like avoidant personality because he would avoid the kids to not have to deal with it because they were a lot. And so he does stay in his room a lot and plays video games with his friends on the computer. But and he does have a lot of friends. They pool parties and things, like we have going next door. We do that a
Yeah.
lot too.
Yeah.
He's well rounded, but he also introvert, likes to stay to himself too.
Sure. Well, it's probably hard for him to talk to him too. If does he know sign language?
He's pretty good at it.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, that's good. Well, yeah, obviously that's a hard thing sounds like it was
It was a lot.
difficult for everybody,
Yeah.
not just him, but for you too. Was that the first time you had done something like that?
Yeah, I only took them because they were babies and needed language, and the only way they were going to get it is if they had it at home. So.
Oh, okay. So how old were they when you took them?
I knew them since they were 10 months and 3, and I got them at 3. My neighbors had them, and I was their teacher, and then I took them, and then we weren't able to get like help that they needed, so they moved on. But
Yeah. And you said that was like a year ago or something like that
mm-hmm.
and were they placed in another foster home or?
No, with the like great grandparents.
Oh, okay. Were they all siblings?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's obviously that probably has an effect for sure.
Yeah. Well, that got him used to always wanting to go to his rooms to avoid
Yeah.
chaos.
Gotcha.
So.
Did he ever talk about any of those things or any of those experiences with you? Did you guys ever talk about what was going on, even after
Yeah,
they're gone?
but he said he's tired of it. He's
Yeah.
over it, and
Okay.
he doesn't want to anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Anything else that would be helpful for me to know?
I mean, he's really good. He goes to a law school. He's in debate and moot court. He's got a lot of. He's a basketball player. Plays guitar. He works out all the time, trying to bulk up.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary. He's 6'2" and he's 15, so he way overpowers me.
Yeah. Well, Yeah,
I don't want
physically
to see him
he,
get mad. I want him to be
yeah,
calm around
of
at home.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Of course. If he gets upset, mad, irritated, it doesn't have to be a huge blow up. But if he gets upset or irritated, can you tell if he's irritated and mad?
Yeah. He just gets like snippy. He talks back when he gets mad.
Okay. All right. Now this is a really weird question, but I want to understand when you're, because you've said it a couple of different times in different
Mhm.
ways. When you're saying either buck up or talk back or be disrespectful, could you tell me what that means?
Well, like in the car, the
Hmm.
shut up, your opinion doesn't matter.
Okay.
You're not my dad. That's what I was calling buck
Okay. All right.
up. um, talk back like he would say, give me a reason to respect him and then I'll do it. You can't tell me one? Tell me
Mhm.
one. Like just I'm like, is this all this like lawyer training teaching you how to
Oh, okay.
don't do it to fight your mom,
Yeah. Yeah. So he's trying to build a case
Yeah.
of some
I'm
kind.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
calm down.
Right.
Nobody calm down, everybody. Ever being told to calm down, though. I know that.
Well, that
Yeah. Just makes
still
you
want to
nervous.
still want to say it
Right.
anyway. So so some of that, like disrespect or talking back or the bucking up pieces,
Hmm.
are really that kind of talk that comes from him, and it sounds like it's
And it's kind
most
of a new thing too. I think he's
okay.
just testing boundaries to see what he can get by with.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's quick to get by with nothing and don't get to do what you want when you do that. So
Right.
it's not
Well,
it's not very often, but it's
yeah, and I guess one of the things I'm wondering is, like, it sounds like that really only happens if he's upset or
hmm
something's going on he doesn't like, let's say, or something,
right.
right? So it's
Hmm.
not, in other words, it's not like regular old day. He's not gonna.
No, he actually is really good at he
Yeah.
analyzes everything and he's
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. It must be really. It must be kind of difficult for him right now, this part of his life, to
hmm
understand where he fits.
yeah.
I wonder. And I
I think
wonder.
that's exactly it.
Well, I wonder what the other thing I wonder about, and I don't know this. So these are just like I wonder, kind of like
Hmm.
things,
Or
because
to see like if me and my husband get into an argument or something, that would that just make it well. We're used to being alone, so just leave him. Like no, sometimes when people get in arguments, you got to work it out.
yeah, sure, yeah. I mean,
So you can't just drop it. But
yeah, but that's sometimes a difficult concept,
yeah.
even for adults to understand. Sometimes,
Hmm.
you know, I also wonder where you feel like you fit, where your husband feels like he fits, where his son feels like he fits. Like,
His son feels like he doesn't fit, and that's the
okay,
problem.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know that
And no, and then mine makes it so doesn't help that
yeah,
situation.
sure,
His
sure.
insecurity, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and when I say fit, we could be talking about a lot of things, right? Like
Hmm.
physically, we're here. Should we be here? Emotionally, like
Like they both just stay in the room and don't like
interact.
interact. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, it sounds to me like you have this heaviness, like you were saying eggshells at the beginning. Like that's the first thing you
Hmm.
said was there's
Because that's what
time,
it
not all the
feels like.
time, just,
They're
yeah,
not.
just, yeah.
Nobody's like. It's not like a cohesive group. It's
Yeah.
everybody for themselves. So
Yeah. It's almost like, to me, you feel like you're lugging this around for everybody. Like you're trying to figure
trying
this
to
out.
make it work. I like a forcing Sunday fun day and nobody's having
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
What is so important to you about making it work?
I just want everybody to be happy because nothing's changing. Like the people aren't leaving, so we have to be happy here together.
Okay. What do you think makes, what do you think drives you for that? Like, hey, I want everyone, I just want everyone to be happy. What drives that for you? You think?
Well, I don't want to live in stress.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
And I want them to be happy. Like
Hmm.
nobody wants their child to not be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, not that I can think.
When you're feeling like I want to push, not push, but when you're wanting everyone to be happy, and that's a drive, it sounds like is that the similar drive as when you saw those babies? I mean, you took them in to help them.
Hmm.
Is it the
Yeah,
same?
I wanted them to know what a loving home
Hmm.
and language at home was like,
Hmm.
because now they sign.
Communicate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
did.
so what's important to you to
I
have
would have
this
still had them today
loving?
if it wasn't, if they were able to, they needed to be institutionalized. If there was more help available for deaf children, I would still have them today, but it was a danger to my family. So I had to,
Gotcha. That was probably a hard decision too.
it was. Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. So this drive to have this kind of happy home and like you
Just
just said,
normal. I just
yeah,
normal
just
home, mow
yeah,
the grass, cook
yeah.
dinner,
What's
regular
important?
life.
What's important about that to you? Like, what does that feel like? What would that feel like to have that?
Well, you know what? Because I haven't had it. That's why I want it. Just the normal life. I want to cook dinner, mow the grass,
Yeah,
watch movies at home, just normal life.
yeah, yeah. So you're saying you haven't had that?
No, and neither has my son. So that's why, maybe that's why I'm pushing so far hard to make it.
Well, I mean, it makes sense.
I mean, that my ideal happy life, just normal. That's what I would rather
Yeah,
just have.
yeah. I don't like
Peace.
I hear what I hear you saying right now specifically is I want my son to have something I didn't have.
Hmm.
Now,
And didn't
everybody,
him either,
everybody,
right?
yeah, everybody. I want everyone to have something I didn't have. It like just normal, like mow the grass and eat dinner and go to a movie and yeah, like
That's
with
living the dream. Just
yeah,
a normal, peaceful life.
yeah, yeah. So part of that is the drive for you is a drive for you to provide something that maybe you didn't either wasn't provided for you or you didn't have or something.
Oh, and maybe so he knows, so he has a good family and doesn't carry
Mm,
on the tradition of isolation.
yeah. What do you mean the tradition?
Well, I didn't have it, and then he didn't have it. I
Mm.
want him to be married and have a family and not do what I did.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So some of the things that you see him doing are things you did?
No, it's
Okay.
just his life situation was put that way, not by his choice.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, it feels good when and it also sounds like if you could be a part of that change, that would be awesome. Like
Mhm.
you would feel good about that. Like if that was something you helped create, I guess is what I'm saying.
As long as we get to the end, as
Yeah.
long as he knows how to deal and doesn't blow up and
Yeah.
is happy where we're all at. That's
Yeah. Well, let
what
me ask
matters.
let me ask one little kind of separate question, and this is just a kind of a yes or no kind of deal.
Okay.
The 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 way you're talking about it, like I don't have a desire, especially right now today. I don't have a desire to like, well, let's dig into Crystal's background and history and things. I don't have a
Mhm.
desire to do all that. I'm not trying to do that. Um, my question is, would that be important moving forward? Like if we kept meeting, right? Moving forward, would it be okay if we did that first? And number two, if we did it, it's not to like, you know, bash
That's
your
my plan.
history or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just to understand maybe because some of the things you're talking about right now, I hear is like, hey, I had some of these experiences, but I've moved on. I'm trying to move on. We're trying to do we're trying to move
Hmm.
forward. So I don't have a desire to like camp out in the past at all. Just to explain, maybe help explain some things or some reasons why you're feeling the way you do. Would it be okay moving forward if we talk about some of those things? I guess I just need your permission for that.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. And we don't have to do that today. That's not something
Yeah.
that we would do. Right, because we have like 3 minutes left, so we're not going to like
Mhm.
let's unpack Crystal's life, and 3 minutes later you go live your life. We're not going to do that. That's not what we're going to do. So a couple
But
of
yeah,
things.
you could see why he has a lot built up and how
Yeah,
just like just ways to make him okay.
yeah. Are are there things that you have discovered as we've talked?
Yeah, I mean, when he learns his lesson, he doesn't do it again, like when he says, "Ooh, that stung, I didn't get to go," then will
Hmm.
he do it again? No.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask a couple other things. If if you if something happened and this normal life, this life that you kind of would want, which makes
right.
sense, totally makes sense. Like, how would you know it was happening? Would you know it's happening, and how would you know it's happening?
um, I would know if nobody was upset or had an attitude and joined in, and as long as nobody's mad, upset, or hurt feelings, then
Okay,
we're good.
everything's good. Okay, even if they're isolated in their room and not talking.
Well, it's usually because he's playing guitar or on
Okay,
the computer or something like
gotcha.
that. So that's
Okay,
fine. They don't,
gotcha.
I don't have to be in their face all the time. I just don't want them to be mad at anything.
Sure, gotcha. Okay. One of the things that happens with like blending, just in terms of information, um, there's a lot of obviously a lot of research into this area because that's a big bulk of families are blending. There's anywhere from 40 to 55% of families could be blending at one time or another in America, at least. So we know for a fact it takes between 6 and 8 years to blend a family if everything goes well, which is relative, right? Like
Mhm.
going well means, I don't know, something, mostly everything's good. So you guys are kind of on the beginning of that, but it sounds to me like you're also, to me, you sound very aware of the things that are happening, and you're kind of on top of the things that are going on. So you're trying to be proactive with that, which is going to be super helpful for you. I think. I think that's good. I think that's a good thing that's happening for you. But I can definitely understand your frustration and irritation. I can understand that for sure. It makes a lot of sense. Um, is there anything else or any other questions you kind of wish I would have asked you at all? I'm just curious.
No, I think I said more than I was going to.
Okay. Well, are there any questions you have for me? Kind of as we kind of get to the tail end of our time, is there anything you want to ask me at all or anything?
Where did you go to school to become a counselor?
Oh yeah. So I went to Abilene Christian for my master's and Texas Tech for my PhD, and did clinical work like the whole. Starting my second semester, I was seeing clients like, kind of the whole time through. So
Okay.
kind of a
I
long
went to Texas Tech.
process. Oh yeah, wreck them. We can't
Mhm.
say guns up now. It kind of has this weird connotation for people. But yeah.
Alright.
So you were at Texas Tech for your undergrad or grad?
Grad school for vision impairment and deafblind.
Oh, cool. When were you there?
2012 to 14.
I was there from 2010 to 13, so we were like overlapped a year.
Hmm.
Yeah, cool. Any other questions for me about anything?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay. All right, let's stop there. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, we're gonna stop here, and we're all gonna give Crystal a big. If we were in the class, we give you a big round of applause. You did great. Everything was
Yay.
awesome. You did really really well. It can be kind of weird in some way to do this, especially virtually.
Yeah, I
Um,
tried to have a topic that is, a lot of people are going through.
and a lot of people are going through it. You're absolutely right. So let's take about a 5 minute break. So it's a 9:46, so 9:50 ish. We'll come back and then we'll kind of jump in and do some processing, and then we'll jump to the next thing. Okay. All right. I'm gonna pause. Okay. Not sure who's on or off, but we're gonna crank back up here in like a minute. And excuse my little bit of eating here. I rode a really hard ride this morning, and I'm running out of gas. If you're back on, if you could just either pop your video on or say something, that'd be great.
I'm back on.
All right. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I want to make sure that everyone is on. We're going to spend about, probably 50 minutes total, but we're going to spend some of that in breakout rooms. And we're going to talk about it. What I want you guys to do is just talk with each other about what you saw and what you heard. And obviously, we're not judging Crystal, what she said or did. We're just talking about what you saw and heard, right? And then if you were watching and you're like, oh, I really wish we could know more about this area or something like that, or, that would be helpful too. And so we'll come back after a few minutes and we'll kind of all talk about that together. But I found that it's good to do this in a little bit of a group first before we do it as a big group. And so we'll spend a few minutes doing that. Then we'll come back, process that together, and then we'll jump to the next thing. Crystal, do you want to be in a group or would you rather not do that?
It'd help if I unmuted, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
Group is fine.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna put everyone in groups, and hopefully we can do somewhat smaller groups. Okay. So you'll see it pop up on your screen and jump in there. I'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll come back. Yeah, we're gonna cut some people off now. Emma, who's that? Who we got there?
Oh, this is Dante. He's my dog. Kind of all up in my business when I'm on class.
Yeah, they can't help it. They're like cows. They're really curious.
Yeah, my cats are around somewhere, but he's the one that usually gets in my face.
I've got a client right now that has 2 cats, and one will sit behind him and one will sit in his lap the whole time. And when he does my client sometimes gets kind of emotional, not like over the top. Those cats will they'll just come. They're not like bugging him, but they just kind of come around him. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah, sometimes my cats will sit in my lap. I also have 2. They're just somewhere in this.
Yeah, and we've got a friend of ours that has 7 dogs and 7 cats and 3 kids.
That's a lot.
And I was like, that sounds like weird to me. I don't want that, but it happens.
Yeah, I wasn't snorting in the interview thing either. And I have a pug. Yeah. The pug was just snorting the whole time.
I couldn't hear it.
Okay, good. Like they're gonna think I just sit around and snort all day.
Okay. So if you guys wouldn't mind sharing with me what you share in your group, like just reactions and responses, what do you think?
Well, we were great. We lucked out. We got Crystal.
Oh, you got the right person.
Yeah, you put us right in the gold mine. We didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that diamond just showed up. And pretty much we were just really wanted Crystal to know how appreciative we are that she volunteered to do such a, a role for us to benefit from, and selecting one that also allowed her to glean at the same time, because both of you guys are really good, but I really appreciate Crystal's transparency and even her vulnerability to a certain level so that we could get to a certain point of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of free for all people. Y'all just go for it.
We discussed some things just kind of after a little bit of the discussion about the actual intake, was just curiosities on how her stepson's reactions have been to some of the circumstances, as well as kind of some of the reactions of her husband, and seeing that as more of a deeper picture of maybe what's going on, but maybe not at the same time.
Like reactions that they have or what they're thinking, or okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's good.
I imagine a really important part of intake is asking broad enough questions where people can feel like they're sharing, specifically what they came there to share. So there was a couple of things that you asked. You said, when you thought about talking with somebody, what kind of things were you considering working on? But you also asked, is there anything else, or are there any questions that you wish that I would have asked you? I think it was really helpful to have some of those questions to scope the time there, so you can get an idea of really just like where's the hurt, where's the desire for healing. So we talked a lot about the questions, and I also had a question for you. Feel free to let us know if this isn't the time for questions, but how do you gauge when it's appropriate to maybe share a personal experience as a show of connection or empathy? Because I mean, as she was sharing, I remembered my experience being part of a blended family, and the feeling of like, they don't have room for me, or I don't fit into their rhythms. And, to be able to share, hey, you know what, like I can understand that feeling of emotion or whatever, and can remember a time when family, didn't feel like it fit, or things like that. So I'm just curious how you navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great question.
What did you do for that? Because that's how our kids are.
Yeah. What did you do?
I cried a lot, but I think some of those things I didn't know how to deal with until I was an adult, and then kind of circled back and just shared what my experience had been like. But when I think about my kids now, my hope I think what I wish my parents could have done was help teach me more of my own emotional regulation skills, and to just hold space with me. So rather than trying to fix how I was feeling, just to empathize with, hey, blended families are hard. Even the knowledge of like, it does take a while for us to find our rhythm. What are some things that you feel like would help you feel like you have a special place in our family? And I think that would have, just those conversations, I would have been like, can I have a date night with my dad once a week that doesn't have to have my stepmom and my half brothers? And not because I don't want to be with them, but because my family before was just me and him. So like being able to talk through those things. So I don't know that we ever got it truly resolved. But as an adult, it's been helpful to talk about what my experience was with my family. And there's been healing now. So now it's sort of like a new family, because, I'm grown up, I have my own kids. So now it's different. But
So how do you do that, Christina? How do you do that without doing what you just did?
can you ask that question in a different way?
Yeah. How do you do what you just did with Crystal? Because right now it's fine. Information's great. Like in a class setting, right? We're in a setting where we're like talking about information. It's awesome. In a session, when you're with clients, sometimes there's information you need to give. Like I told her at the end, like, hey, 6 to 8 years is pretty normal to blend a family. That's pretty much what research tells us. At the same time, all the information you just said, I think is awesome, actually. Everything you just said, because you're at a place now where you've processed it, and you're finding yourself being able to potentially help Crystal or her son or her stepson or whoever So how do you convey the information you just said? How do you help her see the value in that? How do you help her see that? How do you help her process that? So using the information that you have, like how would you ask questions to help her see those things is kind of what I'm asking.
I think
Was
that would
that like a
answer.
like a
Put it into
rhetorical
question.
asking?
I think like what you just said is just like put it into questions. Like you could say, how are we working to make them a special part? Or do you let them do, go out on their own
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
make it
It's
into
not,
questions, like
yeah,
what you just said, but turn it into questions on me instead of
yeah. And I'm not trying to catch you guys. I'm literally like, this
you're
is
waiting.
part of the process, right? So how do good questions are better than good advice 100% of the time, 100%, right? So everything you said, Christina, I love it. I love everything you said.
Would it be okay if when we're practicing to say, would it be helpful to you if I shared some of my own personal experience as, kiddo in a blended family? Because I think it could be helpful and appropriate to this session. Like, could I sort of put that feeler out there rather than just providing it? Like, I
How
don't
do you
feel
do
like
it?
text. Yeah.
So part of what I'm going to give you guys right now, you will talk more about in other classes, but I'll just give you like a little bit of a feel for it, kind of. When we're sharing personal information, there's no rule that says you can't do it. Some of it's based on the model of therapy that you use. For example, if you say, I'm going to be a cognitive behavioral therapist, they don't hardly ever share their experiences. They don't really talk about their own experiences. It's only focused on cognitions and behaviors and some emotions, right? That's literally like, that's the model of therapy. If you're more of a postmodern therapist and you lean more towards, like, let's say narrative therapy, for example, which is pretty postmodern, sharing your experiences is not a big deal, and you can do that. It doesn't matter the context. I probably wouldn't do it with Crystal during the first session necessarily, unless I have a situation where we're not building the rapport that I feel like we need to, and I might say something that builds that.
I was thinking that did help with rapport, because when she said that she came from a blended family, I felt like she was more qualified to talk to me about it because she's experienced it. So that kind of like was more like intriguing. Yeah, I do want to hear that because you lived
So
it.
you feel that way, but someone else here might not have
Yeah.
felt that way.
It helps build a rapport.
Right. So
Yeah, I saw a counselor who I only made it like a few sessions with her because she was driving me crazy with the self-disclosure. It was like every time I shared something, she was trying to connect by sharing an experience that she felt was similar. But to me, it was like, that's not the same thing. You don't understand. And there wasn't like an empathetic response. It just immediately went to her. And I was like, I feel like I'm your counselor right now.
Yeah.
And so it was so exhausting. And I was like, you're not even listening to me. And so I probably made it like 3 or 4 sessions. And I was like, I cannot do this.
Yeah, I think it goes by feel a little bit. You have to feel for what they're going through. And like I said, sharing your personal experiences is not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. It does depend on when you do it and how you do it. I try to lean more towards asking questions. Like there's several things that Crystal said that I related to. But we don't have to relate to things for me to help her either. Like, we don't have to have common experiences or common interests, or we don't, to be quite honest with you, I've had several clients in the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, just because of some of the clients I've been working with, that I have zero commonalities with, hardly any commonalities. But I can work with them because I know that I can empathize, I can be non-judgmental, right? I can use warmth, I can ask questions that are open-ended, kind of thing. If all else fails, if you fall back to those areas, you will be able to work with pretty much anybody, pretty much. So sharing your personal experiences, I think, can be super helpful. It just depends on how you do it and when you do it. And that's also kind of a preference too for you. Because you want to walk the line between what Ashley's saying, like every single experience is an experience I have, and let me tell you about it. And what Christina was sharing, hey, I kind of resonate with that because I had this experience, and when I'm hearing you say that, I'm starting to like, I think it would be okay at some level to go, I hear you say this, and I kind of have a feeling inside of me that's like, I feel a little bit sad. I wonder if your son feels sad sometimes, because I felt sad then because of some of the things that happened. I'm just kind of making that up, but that is a way to do it in a way that allows them to either say yes or no, right? You try stuff sometimes, and if it works, awesome. If it doesn't, that's fine. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think part of it is attunement. Like I don't have, like my counselor now shares things with me now that she knows me and we have rapport, and she'll share things that are helpful and she'll ask first. But I think a lot of it is attunement. Like the first counselor, it probably wasn't the fact that she was sharing. It was the fact that every time she shared, I shut down because I felt like I didn't have a voice, but she didn't notice.
Right.
So had she noticed and been like, oh, what does it feel like when I share something, and I would have had the space for that and we could have talked about it, then I probably would have been fine. So I think it's just noticing how people respond to something. So if you try it once and you can tell that they responded weird or something, then that's probably not the client to do that with or something.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why I believe too, can you hear me okay? Am I on?
We got you.
I think it's really important too that, as the text even shares, and several of our other texts share as well, that we really need to know where our head is at when we are speaking with our clients as far as our personal experiences are concerned, because I don't think half the time we realize how much we are affected or infected by them and how far we should go. Christina, your situation puts you in a real positive zone to be able to know what types of questions to ask to get where you need to go in developing your map, your treatment map, without disclosing yourself. Because sometimes it's almost like we're talking to the client, they're sitting on the couch, and we get so much into our personal space. It's like, hey, move over, I'm gonna come sit next to you. Well, that's not the position that we have, but you've got a great position to even study and review your introduction as you evaluate how you want to treat, and your assessment, to go back into your personal space and what you have learned and get the questions that you need to get the information to make them reach their better spot.
Yeah, I think you have a really good point, Teresa, in that. And this will happen to you as you're working with people. There's a skill that we don't talk about a lot until you get in some other classes, but there's this skill of like self-reflection as you're reflecting with a client that you start doing. It's almost like a metacognition in a way that you won't share necessarily with the client, but you're doing it yourself, right? That can turn into transference or countertransference with your client if you let it. So you have to be aware of it, right? So having self-awareness is super important. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I've got certain triggers with certain types of clients based on some experiences I've had. And we're all going to have things like that we're going to have to be aware of. And as they're talking, I get a trigger, and in the back of my head, I have to keep it back there. But the weird thing is that you have a conversation with yourself while you're having a conversation with them. And a lot of times you can do it at the same time. I know that sounds strange, but it happens quite a bit. I personally think that's a skill like a muscle that we build. And unfortunately for me, it's a muscle I build, and I use it all the time, like on all my friends and family. Like I do it all the time. It's going all the time. Like I was doing it when Teresa was talking. I mean, you just naturally do it. And so the only time it gets kind of dangerous is if you get lost in that voice and that conversation instead of listening to what what your client's saying. But that goes back to, being aware of what's going on for you. And so anyway, all that to say, some of this stuff you'll talk about a lot more in other classes, but are there any other observations or any other, like even questions you wish would have been asked or anything like that?
I have a logistical. Oh, sorry, you can go.
Okay. Well, okay. I was going to ask you, Dr. Bedard, of like, I'm trying to think how to ask this, but there were times when you were asking a question that you would sort of intro it, like kind of qualify with, hey, I know this is kind of a weird question. Don't read too much into, or something sort of to like qualify that question before it was even asked. And I'm wondering how much of that is like a very intentional technique to sort of build rapport and to make the client more comfortable by sort of maybe lessening the gravity of the question potentially, and how much of that is just your personality type and just the way you interact with human beings and speaking. I don't know how much of that is like something that we should expect as future counselors to try to emulate, and how much of that is just, no, that's just who you are.
Crystal, do you recognize what she's saying?
Yes.
What did you think about that?
I mean, it's a class. I would have answered it anyways, try to like lessen the blow of the question, make it easier. I would have answered either way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more probably just what I do. I don't think you don't have to. I take the Columbo, I'm dating myself now. I take the Columbo approach to most everything. If you're too young to know who that is, you can Google it later, but
I have only a vague memory of people watching Columbo at my house. Yeah.
so I take this approach of like tentative curiosity. I just do that by style, probably because I work with teenagers for a long time and they really respond to that really well. And I think adults actually do too, if I'm being honest. Kids do for sure, but that's just for my style. It's probably more of a style thing. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. You can be rapid fire questions if you want. I mean, it just depends on your style, kind of thing. Yeah, it's a good question.
Doc, I appreciated your experienced ear, because your questions were not, she may have heard a question on the level, but you were really going underneath that question, getting that response to go underneath to drive you in a different way. So your ear was, you were going for something specific and she was answering something in general. And in that, her general answer, you started getting what you needed specifically as you developed, not just getting a client to like you, but a client that knows that you're prepared to treat.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Some of that's just, you get better at asking questions. Everyone's going to do that.
Mhm.
And that is Columbo, even Monk.
Yeah, it's definitely Columbo and Monk. Monk's more modern. I should start saying Monk. But there's people here that know who Columbo is. I'm not gonna, let's stick together, people. Let's stick together. Monk is that's a good one though. Yeah. Now you guys could have another therapist, another professor in our program, and they would do it totally different than me, right? And do the same and be just as effective, or what, everyone's going to have their own way. And this is part of the reason why the assignment is important for me to give you guys, is to start finding what your way is. That'll be good for you. Are there questions you wish would have been asked? And Crystal, that's for you too. Are there questions that you're like, oh man, I wish we could have talked more about this or something?
I guess it would be like after the initial one, like ways to help,
Mm-hmm.
like things that we could change, or that, but that would be after.
Yeah.
It's it all in one sitting.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hey, if I could do that, I'd charge anything I want. I have a line of people out the door. That'd be great. I have two sessions. You'd be fixed. That'd be great.
I have a question that I wish you had asked. Crystal, when you and your spouse decided that you wanted to get married and you knew that you were going to be blending families, was there any type of preparation therapy that you had as a couple and as a family, just to start learning how to practice interacting?
No. Go with the flow.
You just went with it? Sorry guys, I'm grabbing something real quick.
I think I would have asked if you had had a conversation with your son about the transition and what he had said and thought about the whole marriage and blending families.
I'm gonna guess what he would have said, but Crystal, what would he have said? Yeah.
I think that would have just helped me to know like how much you're communicating with him. Like, not that it really mattered, but just to get an idea of like y'all's relationship or something.
Yeah.
But I also had a logistical question.
No, I'm not
I think
answering no more questions. I'm just kidding.
I think I was surprised at how quickly y'all dove into the issue. Like in my head, the intake session would have been like things that stood out to me in the intake paperwork or like further clarification on like every aspect of her life. And so I don't think I was anticipating that. Is that just for a client who comes in with like a very specific thing and not just like, I don't know what's wrong. My whole life is just like, what's the reasoning behind that? Or is that just because it's a class and you don't have intake paperwork or what?
Yeah.
Follow the lead, just whatever I shot out first, you know,
Yeah.
like that stuff about my the other kids that I had, he didn't know that. Like it was just went on with the conversation.
Yeah, what y'all saw, what I just
I
did, I
couldn't-
do with I try to go as deep as quick as possible. I mean, if I'm just being honest. I had a supervisor one time say this, and I thought, at least for me, it resonated really quickly. He's like, I don't have a lot of time for small talk when I'm with my clients, and so I try to get there as quick as I can. So I kind of take that. At the same time, if you have a client that's real resistant, you might need a little more small talk. Crystal obviously was like, she already came in knowing, I want to talk about this. These are the things that are going on. These are the things that have happened. So that was easy. She was easy, super easy client. That's a great client that knows kind of what they're looking for, what they want to do. And Crystal's also a doer. She's not a let's
I didn't want to waste time.
let's
I'm ready.
philosophize about this. She's like, give me the 4 steps so I can get this,
Yeah, well, I wasn't necessarily meaning like small talk. I was just thinking like we're all humans. We don't just have like one issue, I think. So I was expecting more like, I don't know, other intakes I've had, it's like, tell me about your past relationships, tell me about your family growing up, tell me about blah, blah, blah. And so they're trying to get like a holistic view to see if other things tie into the major thing that you're coming for. So it wasn't so much small talk. It was just like the narrow focus of we're going to talk about this one thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That would have taken all day.
Do you think it was narrow, Crystal?
Like I could see what, like if it wasn't a class, like how you would ask more about growing up, and but also if they have something specific, you can branch off that and bring all that same information in. Because there was way more to it. We just had a few minutes, you know.
Yeah, I think it's some of that's just style, or some of that's just your whatever you do, like how you work with people. I think it just depends. I'm also an emotionally focused therapist, so my natural tendency is to go a little deeper than the surface if I can. If I can't, that's okay. And even that, if that means that like the first session, which doesn't mean I can't talk about multiple things. I mean, we talked about like probably 5 different areas during the time that we could have gone down the path of, any one of those 5, probably.
And he did ask, can he have another, if we were to have another meeting, can we go back and talk about my growing up and all that? Like,
yeah, and I think Ashley, you have a great question. I think some people will go about that first session in different ways. But there's a structured, that's why I've given you guys some questions to ask. And even if you look in the book, you'll see like checklists you can use even when you have a first session. If that makes you feel comfortable, honestly, that's what you should do. Like if you feel like, hey, I want to talk about your past. I want to talk about whether it's relationships, or I want to talk about your childhood, or I want to talk about whatever it is. And obviously when you get an intake from someone, you kind of start forming some theories or like curiosities that you're going to ask about too. So it's a great question. I think it's just kind of a little bit of a preference. I feel like I'm saying it's a preference a lot because it kind of is a little bit of a preference.
Wouldn't it also be
Don't you
about
think
how
that,
often?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sid.
I was just gonna say, wouldn't it, the more you look at intakes, the more you look through intakes, the more you're gonna be able to see what you really want to get to.
Mhm.
So as you're doing more and more and more of them, I think like you said, it's gonna be easier for you to kind of really see where you want to go quickly. I think Crystal did make it easy for you to get into it. And the other thing I was going to suggest is that there's going to be the intakes that have something that really stands out to you as outside of what you've worked with a lot. And so that might lead me to explore that a little bit. But I just kind of feel like as you do more and more and more of them, you're gonna need to spend less and less time on those kind of things because you're already going to be ready.
Yeah, and honestly, going back to Ashley's original kind of comment and question, sometimes you don't know what to do, or you don't know where to go, or you don't know the direction, and that's when you would get more generally, even more general, right? Like there was a direction I would love to have gone, but we're not going to do that in a 45-minute class, right? But you're going to have that with clients. Here's the other thing that happens too. Happens quite a lot, actually. You get to like 5 minutes left and they drop some big boom bomb on, like, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this, kind of thing. And then you're sitting there going in your mind, like, okay, we probably need to talk about that, but we have 5 minutes, so we can't talk about that right now. So then what do you do, right? Actually, that's a good thing, because what that means is they're starting to feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to be vulnerable and talk about whatever thing is happening. So basically, you walk into the space knowing it's a sacred space to begin with. It's a space that they're coming to you looking for help. That means just that act in and of itself is a vulnerability. Just that, which takes courage. And not courage like I'm slaying a dragon. We're not talking about, that. I'm talking about just personally, like being open enough to, do that with someone. So you take that into consideration too when you're working with people. And so but if you get stuck, even in the first session, sometimes you can back out and go, wait a minute, I need to ask about, these other 3 things before we pick a direction. And a lot of times I'm very collaborative too with goals. Like we didn't do this time, but like with Crystal, we would have formed goals. Like we would say, hey, what's our goal, right? And we would have been specific and would have been like 2 or 3 goals, and then we would have headed that direction. I do want to say, no, go ahead, Teresa.
Crystal was a great example of that client that comes to you, and it's usually in the form of a woman who's had enough.
Hey,
and
easy
she
now.
knows exactly what she wants.
Yeah.
By the time she gets to you, it's because she's been driven to you. Yeah. And she knows exactly what she wants. Bada bing, bada boom. She's going to lay it out, and all you have to do is give her the dose of medication you prescribe.
Yeah. I do want to bring up one thing on the topic of blending. So this book. So I've heard Ron speak. His name's Ron Deal. He's a marriage and family therapist too. This book is phenomenal because it gives super duper practical application, and it's research based. He spent a lot of time going through this. He's a great speaker, great writer, and just a really good guy. This book and the concepts in it, I got to hear him actually teach on it before the book came out when I was in my master's program. And it's really super helpful. So especially if you find yourself working with clients from blended families, which you will, even if they're individuals, you're going to find that. I mean, it's just going to happen. So, okay, Crystal, anything that you would like to bring up or bring out or say, and then we're going to jump to something else.
No, I think it was good. And the questions at the end were good too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, let's transition now. And I put slides just so you guys know. First of all, I put all the slides from all the chapters on Moodle. I did that this morning. And then the slides that I'm using right now, the discussion we're going to have right now are on Moodle too. I'm going to show them as well so you can see them. But I did do that. We have about 30 minutes of time here to talk about assessments. And so what I told Crystal was Crystal and I talked about this like before anybody got on. Since I kind of already knew what she was going to talk about, I decided to talk about marriage and family assessments because that's kind of what we were talking about today. So we kind of jumped to chapter 14, basically. We're going to talk about those today and what that means and what that looks like. And so that means I get to talk about systems theory a little bit. I'm going to give like a 5-minute little definition over something that's a lot more complex than 5 minutes worth. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And I don't like
still on my Zoom.
so dang small. I don't like that so small. Okay, here we go. Okay. So when we talk about assessments in terms of marriages and families, and I'm gonna talk about them kind of in the same way in terms of assessing. We talk about systemic approaches, and so Dr. Hubbard teaches a marriage and family therapy class and a couples therapy class. So he actually goes into systems theory a lot more detailed than I do. But my training was in systems theory as a marriage and family therapist. I have other training too, like in other theories, but systems theory is what we use to talk about how families or couples or people in relationships interact. And so the basic idea has always been there's what's called general systems theory that's been around for a long, long time. So sum isn't greater than the parts is kind of the idea, right? So there's different parts of something that make up a whole, and those different parts affect the rest of the whole. For example, when you change a thermostat, you're changing parts of something that affect the whole system of something. Same is true when you're working with a family. If we start working with, if we had Crystal's family, if we had them all in a session, we wouldn't just work with them individually. We would do that, but we would also work in between the relationships, in between the interactions, that space that's in between them, which is really called the process that we see happening between them, the interactions, the emotions that are felt, some of the dialogue, that kind of thing. And so when we're assessing clients in marriages and families, the hard part is the downside of assessments that we have currently today is that they don't really assess interactions. They're only assessing the individuals in those relationships. So you kind of have to be a little creative when you do assessments with marriages and families. It doesn't mean there aren't good assessment processes for marriages and families. There's 2 or 3 that I really like, that I think are really good. And the book talks about several of them. But keeping in mind that what we're talking about really is we have the individuals and then we have the space in between the individuals. And that interactional space is what we're trying to affect as marriage and family therapists. How do they interact and how can we change those interactions, which will in essence then change the individuals and then change the relationship. That's the basic idea. That's the theory behind it. So that's my 3-minute plug. When we talk about assessing families and marriages, we're not really talking about a problem as much as what's going on in the relationship that's not working. Okay, that's kind of important. There's something happening at a relational level that's either an individual level too, or there's an interaction that's not working. There's something happening at a certain level that's not working, and we need to figure out what's not working and try to help it work better. Not perfectly, but work better. One of the things Crystal said she wanted is for everyone to get along and be happy. Well, for everyone to get along and be happy, there's got to be several things that probably need to happen at one time. And one of those is, how do we interact with each other? How do both boys interact, for example? How do both boys interact with each other? You could spend time if you wanted on that, if you wanted to work on that, to help that process. How does Crystal's son and her husband interact? You could spend time on that if you wanted to. There's lots of interactions that you could spend time on. I've talked about this a little bit. Determining what should be assessed and defining it is kind of a difficulty. I think the biggest difficulty is that you're talking about interactions and individuals that are fluid, that are always changing and sometimes changing rapidly. So it's hard to assess them. Like I said, because you're trying to assess what's going on in between them. The other thing is that there's not really assessments right now that have been developed to assess those interactions. They're just assessments that have been developed on individuals that we then have to apply to the interactions. And that's a downside. That's a con against pretty much every assessment when it comes to marriages and families. All right, I'm going to talk about a couple of these. I feel like, Crystal, you might, I don't think you said this when we were actually doing our session, but maybe before. Like you talked about genograms before, I think, right? Did you say
That's what we did in the marriage and family
in the
counseling class.
Yeah. Okay. So one mapping technique in terms of families that I think is really helpful is genograms. One of the reasons why we say mapping is because, let's say you have a family of 4, or even a couple, and then they've got several things that are going on. You just kind of keep hearing about things. You want to know about generational things, especially generational patterns. Crystal even mentioned something towards the end. I kind of want my son to have something I didn't have and have this family that I didn't really have. So we're trying to break a transitional pattern, maybe to a certain extent. So we could spend time on looking at 3 generations in her family or anyone's family. If you have a couple, you can look at both sides, 3 generations on both sides. And then you start to notice any kind of patterns that are forming, not just necessarily dysfunctional patterns, but also functional ones too. But you're basically trying to gather information about the family and how they've interacted, and what are there different events that happened that change those interactions? Are there different world events or different individual events, or was there addiction? Was there mental health issues, or what, all those things that allows you to ask a really broad scope of questions over 3 generations of interactions. And you literally draw it up on I usually use a great big piece of paper. You draw it up, and then you can show the client, like, hey, have you ever seen your family like this? Have you ever seen these things? And a lot of times people haven't. And then you can make kind of interpretations of it, and they can make interpretations of it, and you can kind of talk about that with each other. And it really just starts to shed light on interactions. We're not trying to change those interactions. We're not trying to go back in the past. We're trying to learn from it, and what can we glean from it now? For example, I've had multiple clients that I've done this with. There's a few that stick out to me. One of them was a mom that I worked with. I started working with the couple, and the husband stopped coming. The wife kept coming, and ended up also bringing their 14-year-old daughter kind of towards the tail end of our time. And I did a genogram with her, and she was the 3rd generation of young mom that got married to an abusive alcoholic husband. So her mom did that, and her grandmother, and she actually talked about her great grandparents were in the same kind of generational transactional pattern. So it was basically 4 generations. between 17 and 19 is kind of when a lot of those things took place. And she hadn't really thought about it until we kind of drew it all out. And we drew stuff on her father's side too. We did both sides, and we kind of started mapping it and looking at it and talking about it. And she realized some of the things that were happening in her life had happened with her mom and with her grandmother on both sides. And so it opened up a kind of a wealth of conversation. When her daughter came in, she actually asked permission, which she didn't really need. It's her it's her genogram, to show her daughter. And her daughter's the one that said, Mom, I'm almost 15. That means 2 years from now, I could be getting married with and pregnant. I don't think I want to do that. She kind of said it in more colorful language than that, but that's kind of what she said. It was a very eye-opening experience for the family. And it wasn't eye-opening in like a bad way. It was like, okay, wait a minute. I don't have to do this. Like this could be something we could do something about kind of thing, which is kind of where we spend our time focusing on that. I bring that up to say one thing. When we start talking about marriages and families, it's always, well, I do this with individuals too. You're going to talk about childhood events. You're going to talk about things that happened when people were growing up. You're going to talk about things that they went through in their families or with friends, or we're going to talk, and there's wide ranges of experiences that people have. We don't talk about those things to camp out back there and analyze it, because unless you want to do psychoanalysis, which you can, that is still a model of therapy that is still out there. For us as counselors and therapists, typically we want to try to bring everything back to the present as much as we can. So we don't want to camp out in the past. We want to understand things. We're not trying to find excuses. We're just trying to find explanations. And some of those explanations can be found in the past. Some of them, not all of them. And sometimes we don't need to go back to childhood. It could just be when someone was in their 20s and XYZ thing happened. Like I had a client that I just started with that became an alcoholic basically at college, and he knew that's when it happened, and he had just gone through rehab, and we kind of just went through that history. He didn't ever drink and never really did anything risky necessarily in high school at all. It was only when he got into college. So it doesn't have to be like, I'm 8 years old and this is what happened. It could be I was 25 and this happened. There's multiple things that happen to us at different times of our life, and we just want to look at those markers, but also remember that we're talking about now. And so the other thing that I like doing that kind of keeps us in the now is family sculpting. When we do this, when we have classes in person, it's super easy to do this. It's kind of fun. You can bring your family up, and you can do this in the therapy room, and you basically sculpt the family based on whatever activity they might be doing. Like you just pick an activity, like we're going to pick a nightly activity, and mom will start. Mom wants you to place everyone where they are during this activity. And mom's a sculptor, but I move people, right? I move people around. I can even make them turn to each other. I can have their hands up. We can have them on a phone. We can do anything. You sculpt them how they are. And you let each member of the family sculpt. And at the end of it, you kind of have a snapshot of what people see as how their family interacts. And you can have some really profound conversations about it. And then you can say, hey, how do we want this to be? How would we like for this to happen? I've had times where I had a family of four. It was a family of four. All of them put dad on the far side of the room with his back turned, and mom and the kids huddled together, including dad did that too. Dad had put himself in the back of the room. And what we learned is that dad had been distancing himself, but he was distancing himself because he didn't feel like he fit with the family. He didn't feel like he was accepted in the family. There was lots of reasons why, but that let us have this really profound conversation, and come to find out that's how dad grew up with his dad. I mean, we found out a lot of things. You can find out a lot of information just with some of these activities, but this is a typically present focused type of thing. And there's different ways to sculpt, but this is kind of the main way. I want to talk about let's talk about marriages real fast. Kind of been focused on families. So there's a number of premarital assessments, like Prepare is one, probably one of the most popular. You do have to get extra training. You can actually go through the training right now as a student, but you do need extra training to use this particular premarital assessment. It looks at several different aspects of your marital life, and then it leads you through kind of a study, and then they give some practical help in some practical like activities to do with the couple that they can do with themselves. There's a workbook that comes with it that's really nice. So we know that for a fact premarital counseling does help marriages in the long run. But we also know that really effective premarital counseling does a really better job. You can just go to premarital counseling, and I've had plenty of couples that went to premarital counseling, and they'll even say, well, we didn't really talk about anything. We kind of just we're in la la land, because when we first get married, unless you're really self-aware, you don't really know that you're going to have problems. It's, marriages don't work just on horse, rainbows and horseshoes and unicorns. You're going to have issues that are going to come up. And a good premarital sessions can help you bring out some potential issues that come up, and then also teach you how to work through them. There's nothing better than experience that teaches us, but a good premarital session, some good sessions can actually help clients kind of down the road, because there are things that are going to come up. I have used the marital satisfaction inventory, the revised one, multiple times. It's very, very good. I use the dyadic adjustment scale in my master's program, and it's a good measure. It's actually a little bit shorter. The MSIR is very good because it's very comprehensive, and it's about as close as you're going to get to like an interactional assessment. So basically what it does is it looks at several different aspects of the marital life: conflict, communication, even looks at if there's any type of violence, talks about money, talks about parenting, talks about sex, talks about all those things. And then it gives you score, as you score it and you share it with the client, it gives like a visual of their score on a graph that's really helpful, which is really nice. It's actually very easy to take. It takes a little bit of time to take, about 45 minutes. You do have to have at least an 8th grade reading level for it. But it's pretty easy to take, and then it's really easy to score, because as they take it, they're actually scoring it themselves. They don't know it because it's got carbon copies that it's using. You can actually get this. Most of all of these that we're talking about in class are electronic now as well, which is really nice. That's super easy to score because you don't have to do anything. They score it for you, which is great. I've used that one mainly when I've got couples that are really kind of stuck, or they say they're stuck, or something's going on and I'm not sure what's going on. I'll use that MSIR. It's really helpful to use. You still use your clinical judgment when you're working with them, but that's a really good one to use. I'm just running out of time. Okay, Crystal asked a great question at the before you guys got on. She was like, is there one we could use with our family? Okay, so FACES is one that's been around for a while, and it uses what's called a circumflex model. I thought I had an example of it, but I don't. Basically different quadrants. When you get done with the assessment, you score it. It's got 4 quadrants on a grid, and it's based on adaptability and cohesion. What we know about families from research is the families that are the most adaptable and flexible in their communication, in their conflict, in their growth, tend to be the more healthy families. So this actually will start to measure some of that flexibility and cohesion that you have. And it goes from a scale of basically like disarray and chaos all the way to overly engaged, overly enmeshed. And you're looking for, there's a sweet spot on the graph that you kind of want to find people in. And if it's not, you kind of want to help them get to that spot. The great thing about this one is that for, let's say with a family of 4 or 5 or 6, each person takes it and you graph it, each person's answers on that graph. So everyone can see where everyone puts their family on that graph, which is kind of nice. I used to have a picture of one. You can Google it, but I'll try to find a picture one. I'll put it on Moodle. But they developed this circumflex model that wasn't new to them, but they've used it for their purposes. It's a really good assessment. The downsides of it are it takes a long time. It takes a little time to take. It's a little bit tedious, and it's a little tedious to score. So you gotta have to get the manual and check it out and take your time. I got to use this one several times in my master's program. It was one of the things that we gave families. We had a whole 2-hour assessment process, intake process at my master's program, where they would fill out paperwork at first, and then we would do an interview, and then we would score everything. And then basically the first session started after like the third session, basically, because we did all of this assessing on the front end, which is really helpful. This one is really good, especially when we're trying to figure out how everyone sees where they fit on this grid that we're looking at. But it also allows for us to look at adaptability and cohesion in our communication and how we do conflict. There's just multiple things that you can talk about. And it's super fascinating to see how people see themselves on that graph. And there's definitely times where you do assessments with people and you always give them the results, and you can ask them what they think. And there's going to be times that are like, I don't agree with that. That's not where I'm at. That's not what's going on. And that's even a better conversation to have. So those are kind of the main big ones that are out there. And those are the ones that I kind of use too, or have used in the past. Okay. Now, one of the things that I always bring up when we talk about marriage and family therapy assessments is, and this goes back to some questions that everyone was asking too before, you have a style that you develop as a therapist, as a counselor, and part of the style is how you assess the things that are going on with the couple or the family. And those actual pencil, paper, or electronic assessments just help you understand things, especially when you have multiple things going on at once. Because as you can imagine, you got multiple relationships, multiple interactions. Sometimes it's hard to place everything that's happening. And sometimes people tend to present something to the counselor or therapist that might not actually be happening. And so you want to look underneath some of those things sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it happens. I've definitely worked with plenty of couples and families where one or two of the clients kind of present that, we do this, but it's not really that bad. And really, it's kind of bad. It's really, really, really bad. And then the opposite's true too. Sometimes things are presented, it's like, this is the worst thing. And they're really using catastrophic thinking. It's really not as bad as they're saying. So those assessments can kind of help us level the playing ground a little bit, level the playing field so we can understand a little bit. Okay. Now, let me stop and take a step back. Do you have any questions about those things? I feel like I talked really fast and went through that really quick. Anybody here want to work with marriages or families, or I'm just curious. We usually have a few folks. Okay. Any questions about anything, class related, profession related, anything? Any questions? Or anything we've talked about today? Could be anything.
Did I miss you expounding on when we received our partners, the description of our assessment process? Or how that's going to be selected, or what that's going to look like?
Yeah, the partners are listed on Moodle.
I saw that.
Yeah, so you'll just coordinate your time with whoever you're partnered with. I think I put the email address there too with each person. So all you'll do is coordinate with them, and then the actual mock session document that I gave you should map out kind of what you're going to do. And I put questions you can ask each other, but you can, you guys can choose if you want to use that as a template. Awesome. In the book, there's also checklists of questions you can use too in those intakes. You can do that as well. The one thing I'm going to put up today is the actual Hope Hearth inventory and manual. So you'll have that, because that's the second part of the thing you're going to do with the second part of the session you're going to do with each other, where you're going to give that assessment to each other and take it, and then you'll score it and then basically give the feedback on it. It's not hard to do. That's why I chose it. It's in it, and it's actually a really good assessment. But I have not put that up online yet. I put one up online, but the link didn't work, so I have to redo it. So, but I'll put that up there today. So you should have and if everyone's watching from home right now, you should have your pairing. You should be able to partner with that person starting today.
So we're talking about a real issue in our life like Crystal did.
It's probably the most helpful if you do. It doesn't have to be hardcore or anything, but it's probably more helpful for you, for the therapist, and as the client, if you're talking about something that's, a real issue. But it doesn't have to be like your deep, darkest secret or something. I mean, you can pick something like, I don't like this class and I hate this professor, or even, I don't care, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can pick anything.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? Or are you ready to go to lunch? Yeah. Some of you are going to see me again in like 5 minutes. We're going to talk about emotions today. We're going to talk about adolescence and how they're so awesome and so easy to be around all the time. Okay. Hey, Crystal, awesome job. Thank you so much for volunteering. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope it was at least helpful in some way. But you're a very smart person. I think you're going to figure this out. Okay. You guys have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Great class.
Bye-bye.